Everybody says how frightened people are of Donald Trump and how frightening he is. The two of you have won against him. How did you manage to ignore the anxiety and the fear of taking on someone as powerful as Donald Trump and stick to a winning strategy?
See, I don't understand how people can be afraid of a fat, elderly man who wears apricot makeup, his hair done up like Tippi Hedren in The Birds, and sits in a courtroom and moans and groans and complains and snorts when Joanna, when the jury got a load of him. They were mesmerized. You have never seen anything like it. He never sat still, and he talked the entire time within earshot of the jury. He belittled Alina Habba Esquire, his own attorney. He would spit as he was talking. He didn't smell so good. And the high point of Donald Trump in court was the moment he stood up with steam coming off his back and hot air blowing out his ears because Robbie Kaplan was giving the final argument, and she was asking the jury how much it would take to make him stop, and she drove him. You think Robbie Kaplan's afraid of Trump? No, she turned it around. She drove him so crazy, Joanna. He stood up in the courtroom and left.
He stormed out.
When a man is innocent, he doesn't storm out of a courtroom. He stays and fights. He turned tail, and stormed out of the courtroom. I mean, he lost right at that second. I mean, he couldn't have looked more guilty. But that's how frightened Robbie Kaplan is of him. And there's really, there's a theory out there. Mary Trump's theory is he's a myth now. He's a myth. And it's the people around him who believe in this myth who are giving him the power. I'm not so sure. I just think he's an old fat guy, and he's doing he's the most powerful man on the planet. There's no question. No question. Nobody is more powerful. And he's super smart. Nobody has been elected president twice like Trump. You can't be dumb and do that. So we are contending, yes, with an enormous intelligence and an enormous amount of power, but we are not frightened of it. We're not frightened of it.
I've known you both for a long time, and Robbie, it's hard to imagine that you are frightened of anybody, and especially in the courtroom. You are fearless in the courtroom. You are like a machine in the courtroom.
Yes. Yes.
So what was your strategy dealing with someone who, as E. Jean says in the courtroom, is mesmerizing, and he's deliberately concocted himself like this? And E. Jean, I think your observation of him as a myth is brilliant, actually, because people respond to the myth as opposed to the actual 79-year-old frail old man. Robbie, when you're a lawyer, what is the psychology you're adopting to go after someone like this?
So the whole difference, you put your finger on it, Joanna, the whole difference here is the courtroom versus everything else. So in the courtroom, we had a very, very experienced, very stern judge, Judge Lewis Kaplan, not my relation, not my mentor, but a very highly respected judge who you don't want to mess with, in short. We had rules that apply. People can only say certain things if they're consistent with the rules of evidence. There's things that you can't say or do. You have to wait for a question in order to answer the question, etc. And we had a jury, frankly, in the first case, that wasn't a New York City jury at all. We had no one from New York City on that jury. There were all people from north of Westchester County, I think one from Westchester County, and we had to convince them unanimously, 9 jurors each time. And so I believe that what made the difference is only the facts could come out. In court, we have ways of making sure the facts come out. There's no AI. There's no fake movies. There's no fake documents. Everything has to be authenticated. And when the jury heard the evidence, it wasn't very hard. And I just do what I always do. I just kept my head down and tried the case the way I've always learned how to try a case and tried to keep the noise out as much as possible. I should say that in my closing argument, the second trial, he was sitting probably about 7 feet to my left. And I just made sure I didn't look his way. I only knew he left the courtroom when the judge announced it, because I was looking very much at the jury.
And why didn't you look his way?
I didn't want to provoke him. I didn't want there to be any kind of unnecessary noise in the courtroom. I wanted the jury. The jury was very, I think, really understood the importance of the dignity of a courtroom and the respect that must be accorded to the courts and to the proceedings in a courtroom. And I didn't want him to be able to use any of his tricks, for lack of a better word, any of his strategies to mess with that.
How fascinating.
And he did a few times, and the jury definitely didn't like it.
What kind of things did he do?
So I'll give you one example. E. Jean probably has better ones because I know they're in her book. But I remember during jury selection, Judge Kaplan kind of conducts jury selection a little bit like speed dating. So you have all these people in a courtroom, and they're asked a series of questions, and they're supposed to kind of raise their hands, et cetera. And one of the questions was, does anyone believe that the 2020 election was stolen? And no one in the courtroom raised their hand except for Donald Trump, sitting in that what's called the well of the courtroom. So, I mean, that was kind of an easy example, but I'm sure the jury took note. There's no question they did.
So, E. Jean, what for you were the most memorable moments of an arduous process in court, in both cases?
Some of them didn't happen in the courtroom. They happened after trial, when Donald Trump would hold press conference and then give his version of everything that went on in the courtroom that day. Two different worlds. And he would tell the world, I'm the one who suffered. I'm the one who should get the damages. It was a high comedy of his world against the world of truth and facts. And of course, the most memorable was when the jury came back during the second trial. We had no idea. Trump was not in the courtroom. He could feel it was not going to be good.
He was playing golf, correct?
Yeah. This is the second trial. He left in a motorcade, speeded away from the courtroom as the jury was being called back. And the Judge Kaplan, when everybody came back into the courtroom, and Judge Kaplan had read the riot act to people in the courtroom. The decorum will be maintained at all times. There will be no jumping up. There will be no shouting. There will be no running for the door. He had all sorts of rules. So everybody was, pretty tense, waiting, because the jury was there. And he said, Madam Forewoman, have you reached a verdict? And she said, yes, she had reached a verdict. And Joanna, when she stood up and we saw that she was the forewoman, she was very attractive, blonde, wearing a rose-colored sweater. She had paid such intense attention to every word. Robbie and I were holding hands, and we squeezed each other's hands the minute she said, yes, Your Honor, we have reached a jury. He said, you will hand it to Andy the clerk. She handed the decision to Andy the clerk. Andy the clerk opens it up, reads it, frowns, shakes his head, folds it back up, and then hands it to Judge Kaplan. And Judge Kaplan opens it up, and his eyebrows rise up towards his hairline, and he frowns, and he says, Madam Forewoman, what does the M stand for?
Wow. Wow. And the M obviously stood for?
And she said, million, Your Honor. And that was a moment. I mean, I left my body. As I say, I felt like Peter Pan, who flies around the ceilings Quite frankly, I've never come down from that, Joanna. That win was so enormous and so powerful, not for me, not for Robbie, but for everybody in the country who had sort of lost hope that he could ever be beaten. And Robbie decimated him, just decimated him. And we're still feeling the good victory of that. It's happened. And Robbie proved, and I proved, that Trump can be beaten. He can be beaten.